How are you this morning? Yeah. Wow, that's great to hear. It was all the coffee cake and fruit and everything, right? This is like a little bit of infusion of sugar, so you guys will be awake during the keynote and then fall asleep for the rest of the day. I'm pretty excited to be in Iowa. I've never been here before, but you guys have a beautiful state. It's really awesome flying in, and everybody's really polite and everything. It's cool. So, I wanted to split up today's talk into two parts. And in the first part, I want to talk about education in Drupal, which is more exciting than it sounds. And then I wanted to kind of step outside of Drupal and take a look at it from the outside. And I think there's a lot of insights to be gained with that. So I'm just going to jump right in. So one of the indicators of the success of Drupal is the fact that we have really great jobs out there for people who know Drupal, right? You can land a job doing all kinds of amazing things. And yet, there's a big talent shortage. There's not enough people to fill the need for Drupal out there. And so what this says is that there's a significant adoption of Drupal. People are just going at it like crazy. But we haven't been able to train people fast enough to kind of fill that gap. So while it's like a good sign, it's also something we should be able to do something about. Because the more people doing Drupal, the more projects can be done in Drupal. And those projects that are a really good fit for Drupal don't have to go to some other technology simply because there are people in other technologies that are available to do the work, right? That just doesn't make any sense. So I have an idea for this, and I just want to get a sense of who that will impact here. So how many people here are learning Drupal, in the process of learning Drupal, right? If you're not raising your hand, you're probably asleep at the moment. And how many of you are teaching Drupal? You're teaching fellow staff members, employees, clients, other people in the community? Yeah, so a good half of you. So this impacts all of you pretty much, right? The problem with education in general is that for the last several thousands of years, learning has taken this sort of form, where actually it's this form here, where somebody's standing in front of a large group of people, and a large group of people is listening patiently to what that person is saying, right? And there's some problems with this. One is that there's a group of an audience at any class, at any training, that comes kind of unprepared for the training. They don't necessarily know the prerequisite material, and so everything that's getting thrown at them is just going over their heads because they're just not ready for it yet. Maybe in a week they will be, maybe tomorrow, but not today. And so, they're going to kind of be disengaged. And then there's this other group of people that already know the information. They've gotten into the material, they know it already, and that group of people is also not going to be engaged because it's not, a lot of fun to just listen to stuff you already know. And so that leaves a sort of narrow band of people for whom the information is right in a typical classroom setting, right? Of this group, there's few of us that have the stamina to actually sit through a lengthy talk. There's research that shows that we can only really pay attention to someone talking for like 5 to 15 minutes. That's not a lot of time, right? And so like at some point during this, I have like a 45 minutes slotted for this talk, right? There's no way we're all gonna, make it that far in terms of like listening, and focusing on it. And so that's a problem because most of us went to school like this, where it was just lecture upon lecture upon lecture, and it's just not built for humans, right? So lucky for us, there have been advances in technology in the last few years that enable an alternative. Oh yeah, and then there's this guy at the front, right? So teachers have a lot of requirements for actually executing their job well. They have to really know the ideas around whatever they're teaching. They have to build a curriculum. They have to format the curriculum in a way that it can fit within the framework of a lecture or a particular time period. And then they have to do the one thing that everybody is totally freaked out about, which, more freaked out about than death, which is standing in front of a group of people and talking, right? So we're asking a lot of people who get into education because they're interested in how people learn, they're interested in teaching, and they're interested in, conveying information, right? And instead they have to do these really freaky, time-consuming things that nobody actually listens to in the end. right? So we're asking a lot of teachers. But yeah, there's a better way. And it's really simple. And a lot of you have probably heard of it, which is that instead of listening to live lectures, students watch videos of the lectures or some kind of form of capture of that video or capture of that lecture. And this makes a whole lot of subtle changes in the way that education works that really is sort of starting this revolution. So the first thing it changes is that students get control of the pacing of the video, or the pacing of the information. So if they miss something, they can rewind. If they need a break or they want to practice something, they can pause. And they can fast forward through stuff that they already know. And they can play back fast. So if someone talks a little slow for your taste, you can play them back fast and listen to them at the pace your brain is ready to listen to, right? So you put that whole control in the hands of a student. Also, people learn at different paces, and they learn at different paces on different subjects at different times, you know? And so being able to set your own pace means that you don't have to be overwhelmed or underwhelmed at any time when you're learning something, which is really powerful. Are you guys following so far, this idea? Also, one thing that's limiting about a typical classroom is that once the class is over, that's it, right? You have to wait for the next class for more information. But when everything's been recorded already, you can keep going. And so if you get excited about something, if a student gets excited about certain material, they can continue going and capturing that enthusiasm. Because learning is really exciting. Like, I don't know if you remember this from being a kid, but everything that you learned that was new was amazing because, like, the world is an amazing place. But as we get older and we kind of have to adapt to these ways of learning that sort of don't jive with how humans work, we start to hate it a lot of times, right? But everything can be really exciting if it's presented the right way. And this gives that opportunity to capture any enthusiasm you have for any subject. So this changes a lot for the teacher as well, right? Instead of the teacher having to prepare this curriculum and practice it over and over again, they don't have to do any of that, right? Because they're not presenting anymore. Instead, what they're doing in the classroom is helping students. They're helping them one-on-one. They're doing one-on-one interactions and mentoring, right? And that changes the role of the teacher. It changes what they do to prepare, so they can focus on other material. They can be actually learning themselves instead of focusing on the same thing every year, right? And they can also focus on how education works and figuring out a better structure for their students. Just making contributions to the way we learn in general. And this changes the prerequisites for being a teacher, right? Teachers no longer need to be rock stars. Like, you guys remember teachers in school that were just amazing? Like, you just loved watching them. They always conveyed information in a way that was compelling. You guys had teachers like that? They were the good teachers, right? You had like one, maybe two in the course of your entire schooling, if you're lucky. Well, this changes everything about that, because teachers don't have to be charismatic. They just have to be enthusiastic and be able to share information one-on-one, which is a whole lot different than standing in front of a bunch of people and trying to teach. So one of the best examples of this being used in practice right now is the Khan Academy. Have you guys heard of the Khan Academy? Yep. Yeah, a lot of you guys have. For those of you that haven't, Saul Khan started creating video tutorials for some of his family members to help them in school because they were having some problems. And he just put them on YouTube so it was easy for them to get at. And other people started watching them. I mean, it's out there. And he started getting feedback saying, I never understood this until I watched this video. Like, in the classroom, things just go by too fast. I can't follow along. So these videos are great. And so he kept doing it, and he kept recording, and now he's recorded thousands of videos, thousands of them, about all kinds of high school level subjects, some college level subjects, like math, chemistry, physics, you name it, right? And kids we're starting to use this as their central method of learning. And, him and a group of people were like, why don't we, attempt to use this actually in the classroom? So they've been piloting programs where in the classroom, instead of listening to lectures, students do their homework, which is where the application happens. And then they watch the lectures, which are in video form, at home, instead of doing their homework at home, which is a whole lot easier to do at home, right? It's a lot easier to sit back and kind of absorb information later in the evening, and then, work during the day when you're actually in the classroom, and get that help one-on-one, because the teacher is free to help people now. It totally changes that teacher-to-student ratio. So this is a pretty awesome. Like, it makes me wish I could go back in time and actually go to school where I could be enthusiastic about everything and really excited. But there's things I can do. So one thing that got me really excited about all these ideas is that I run a site called buildamodule.com. I've been recording video tutorials about Drupal for the last couple of years, and I have a pretty solid library. It's about 700 videos at this point. So hearing about this model made me think, well, is there any way we can leverage this library to actually start to build Drupal talent, on a large scale in the world? Because there's this talent shortage, because there's a big need for it in all kinds of institutions. Can we do that? So the form that sort of live classrooms take in the Drupal space are trainings. And trainings traditionally in Drupal and in most technologies happen the same way that classrooms do. Someone's standing up in front talking, and the students are listening and occasionally interacting. But there's a better way, right? So I piloted a training program at the Bay Area Drupal Camp last year. And so, we had a day-long training, and we had 60 students and 7 trainers. And I tried sort of a modification of this flipped classroom model, which I call mentor training. And the difference is that the students actually watch the videos in the classroom. And on Build a Module, there's sort of videos sort of interspersed with examples and practice. So it's kind of like students are watching videos and doing homework back and forth throughout the day. And then the trainers kind of milled around and answered questions for people. So it worked out really well. And the one thing I wasn't sure about was how it would feel to be in a room full of people all just watching videos, just in a room quietly together. It seems like it could feel a little weird, right? Like kind of cold and not so much fun. But more than that, there was a lot of actual social activity. So people were talking. The trainers that were there were answering questions throughout the day, and so there was this kind of little hubbub going on. And then people were getting to know each other who were sitting next to each other, because you can get help from the people next to you, and you can get to know them and figure out what they're doing and actually make connections with other people doing Drupal. So it ends up being this kind of fun sort of party, like this learning party, right? And people, kind of taking breaks, and the dynamic, I've done this a few times now, and the dynamic changes for the group size and the arrangement of the tables and things like that. But on the whole, there's a lot of really good activity going on that I think really enhances the learning experience and brings things down to kind of a real level. So I was pretty excited about how that went, and so I put together a program which basically allows anybody who wants to put on a Drupal training to get free access to the Drupal, to the Build a Module videos, to give all of their students, all of their trainers access for like over a week, like an 8-day period. And what this 8-day period does is give students a chance to kind of build up some questions before they come to the training, and then continue working for a few days afterwards to kind of wrap up what they were doing, right? And so, so I put together this program, outlined like all the steps needed, some ideas around what you do for the venue and how you deal with internet and stuff, and put it out there. And people started picking it up and doing this training. And it was very easy, because you basically don't need any preparation time. You come to a training like this as a trainer with your knowledge about Drupal, and you just ask a bunch of Drupal friends to come join you, and the knowledge-based coverage that you have is usually going to be enough to answer 90–95% of the questions. And it ends up being so social that it's just like hanging out all day, but you're learning a lot in the process. So it's happened over a dozen times in the last year. We did one yesterday here. For those of you that went to it, was it good for you, so to speak? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So it tends to be a really good experience. After Drupal Camp Edinburgh, this is the yes version of this picture. One of the trainers wrote to me and he said it absolutely rocked. Lots of positive feedback. Some of the trainees were doing some amazing things by the end of the day, having started from scratch. And this is the kind of thing you want to hear about a training, right? You want to hear that people are coming out of it excited, able to make progress, hopefully something that will carry them for a while. But what excites me even more is where things are going from here, right? So we have a lot of really interesting things in place. We have a solid video library that covers Drupal from beginning to end in a lot of ways. Not the end, there's no end, right? But beginning to somewhere in the middle. And we have a training model that actually is scalable, that can train lots of people really fast. And what this really changes about training is that whereas before, to be a trainer, you need this handful of skills, right? You need to know, you would need to know Drupal in and out. You would need to be able to develop a curriculum and learn it, memorize it, practice it, if you're trying to get it to fit within a certain time frame, and then stand in front of a group of people and perform, right? But we're changing that now. So now, in order to train in Drupal, what you need is two things. You need to know something about Drupal. It doesn't have to be much. And you have to like to help people. So how many people kind of fit that bill? You know something about Drupal and you like to help people. Oh, come on. You all like to help people. Yeah. But you don't raising hands is not a prerequisite for being a trainer. It's a good thing. So what this changes is that we have thousands of % more trainers in the Drupal community now because you can do this. And so, if people start to adopt this, start to do it regularly in their communities, we could really start to fill that talent gap really fast. And it also provides a really good mechanism in a community to just offer support for people and an easy way to make progress through things. So, before I go into the next section, I wanted to open it up for any comments or questions about that bit. Yeah.
So say I wanted to do this in my community, I would just contact you and say I want to do this and set it up. I could get access to the videos and that's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that, right? So the question is if you want to put on a training, you just contact me and I set you up with stuff and that's it. Yeah, you contact me. I'll give your account a special permission basically, and that will give you enough. There's just a form there to fill out to give all of your students access. You just fill it out once, and you're squared away. And then there's thoughts on there on how to structure the training, but there's no rules around it. So you can interject whatever you want in terms of activities, in terms of breaks. You don't have to pitch build a module at all. There's no prerequisites. You just get to take it and go with it. Any other questions? Comments? Yeah, there in the back. Yeah, that's a great... Right. Yeah. Okay, so good question. Has there been any sort of information gathering on who the people are that come to these trainings? So in terms of skill level, it ranges, right? People come knowing nothing about Drupal. People come who are are advanced in Drupal, but they can still pick up new skills there. You do have to have a computer or a tablet, some way to consume the videos, and a headset, and that's kind of the technological prerequisite. And you can do these things in labs where they have those supplied already for you. Yeah, does that answer your question? So really it can be a wide range of skill levels and people from all ages, all types of communities and industries. Nope, just no official surveys or anything like that, but that might be a good idea. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. Any more questions, comments? Yeah? Okay, this is when we have a 60-second dance party. Everybody stand up. I'm just kidding. Okay. So a couple months ago, I went to this event called the CMS Expo, which is a little conference. And the idea behind it is that they invite representatives from different CMSs. So CMS is a content management system. Drupal is a content management system. But there's a bunch of others out there, right? And so they invite representatives of all of these, and they also invite people who are evaluating what CMS to use for their organization, so they can all kind of communicate with one another. And so when I got there, I flew into Chicago. The event was in Evanston, so I rode a shuttle to Evanston with this group of 6 guys who were all the creators of or employees of the CMS called ModX. And Ryan, the founder of ModX, tweeted, "In shuttle with Chris Shattuck from buildamodule.com, one Drupal guy amongst 5 ModXers, poor guy." And then a minute later, one of their friends posted, "Ryan, glad I already bought all of Chris Shattuck's videos just in case he doesn't make it to CMS Expo for some unexpected reason." So this was an awesome sort of shoe-in, right? Great introduction to these guys. But this fellow who posted back, Jeroen, kind of got me thinking about some things, right? Here's a guy, he's, I got a little bit of history. He'd been doing ModX for quite a while, and he's just started picking up Drupal. He's actually sort of spreading his wings a bit into other CMSs besides, his core CMS. And, I realized, like, I've never done that. I've been in Drupal for a long time. I'm actually in this bubble, this Drupal bubble. And it's this beautiful bubble. I get everything I need, like, sustainably. It's more like a biodome than a bubble, right? Where, I get community, I get challenges, really interesting projects. I can make a living in this space. And so I've gotten everything I need. Once I adopted Drupal, I've just been Drupal from here on out. So I found myself asking questions of these guys, like, what are you doing? Why are you building another CMS besides Drupal? Like, what would be the point? And once that dust cleared, like questions like, well, so what do you think about Drupal? Like, what do you see from the outside? Because I've never really gotten that perspective. I've just been immersed in Drupal, and this was really interesting. So I want to share some of that feedback. But I also wanted to mention that I didn't just talk to these guys, but I talked to a number of different creators of various CMSs out there, and a number of people that are avid fans of some CMS that's not Drupal, just to get a sense of what their perspective was on things, right? So this is one of the panels at the CMS Expo. They would have like 12 representatives of various CMSs up there, all answering the same question, like, what's the best thing that's happened to your CMS in the last year, and is this good for governments? Is this good for education? Things like that. So I got to talk to a lot of people. And just to get a sense of where Drupal's at sort of in the CMS space, where I kind of got this sense for the first time that we're really part of an ecosystem, that it's not just Drupal out there, far from it. So of the top 1 million sites, I think this was probably Alexa rating, Drupal only scores the 3rd biggest with like 10%. So that's 90% of the sites out there that aren't Drupal, that are on some other CMS. That big red one is WordPress. And then when you get to the top 10,000 sites, things change a little bit. Drupal actually bumps up to 2nd place, but it's still only got 20% of the pie. So there's a whole lot of other stuff going on in the CMS world outside of Drupal. And so, what's the point in sort of thinking about this? I mean, we're here kind of celebrating Drupal, learning Drupal, right? But there's also things happening outside of Drupal that can really help Drupal to grow. There's a lot of interesting things happening out there. And I want to mention some of those things as well. And so that's why I think it's important to sort of get this perspective. So here are the good things that people had to say. And they had good things to say, which was kind of cool. One was that, Drupal is hot. That was the phrase, right? It's being widely adopted, and you can get a job in Drupal, even if you know just a little bit. And so that's kind of a cool thing that doesn't exist in all the CMS spaces. Also, Drupal has a really good community. We have things like this. We have camps, we have user groups, we have some of the best conferences, or maybe the best conference that's put on in the CMS space at all, right? Even though we're not necessarily the biggest, we have a really great community, and also we have awesome leadership. So from the top down, just the sort of atmosphere of kind of empathy, understanding, like we try to bring different opinions together and consolidate them. So Drupal has never schismed. There's never been a fork of Drupal, really, a legitimate fork. And the third thing is that Drupal is pushing CMS adoption at the enterprise level. So big universities, companies, governments are adopting Drupal. And that's largely, part of that has to do with the fact that we have entities in the Drupal space that have learned how to talk with enterprise-level customers. And what this means is that, if you're a consultant or you're working with smaller companies, you can say that the White House is running Drupal. You can say that the Grammys are on Drupal, or that all these universities or hundreds of governments are all on Drupal, right? We can say that because Drupal has been pushed up that far into that level of organization. And that's unique among the CMSs. It's actually helping to push CMS adoption in general, which is good for all the CMSs. Like, they're actually seeing that one, CMS is an answer to a problem that they have, and also that open source CMSs, just open source software in general, is practical, that it can be done. But they didn't, they weren't just all positive. And it all boiled down to this one thing, right? Which is that Drupal is hard to use. And so the narrative I heard kind of over and over again as I talked with people was, well, I was trying to figure out what CMSs were out there. I got, my list of top ones. I looked through this one. I looked at Drupal. I tried to do this particular thing in it. I couldn't figure it out. So I tried this other one. I could figure it out. And that's what I've been using ever since, right? And so it was just like, they tried it. They didn't get this one thing. And so, they moved on and found something that worked. And we know, people who have been in Drupal a while know that Drupal is amazingly powerful. Of course, you can do that thing you were trying to do. Here, let me show you, right? But out of the box, when somebody's kind of by themselves with the software, just like face to face, the sun is hot in the middle of the sky, and they're just trying to figure this out. It's not always going to end in peacefulness and stuff. So we have two things that we can do about this. One is that we can continue to improve the user the interface, the out-of-box experience of Drupal. But in Drupal, that happens slowly. We have really long release cycles, so the next big version of Drupal won't come out until next year, about a year from now. And so, in the meantime, there are things we can plug in to make it better, but we're talking about people just downloading Drupal and using it. The second thing we can do is provide infrastructure. So things like user groups, camps, trainings, things that kind of indicate to people that there's a vibrant community around the software where they can get support and ask questions and things like that. When you see that and you can get help, you can actually talk to people face to face, that makes a huge difference in adoption. So I mean, if you're passionate about Drupal, think about that aspect of it, that's kind of what's in our power at this point. And something occurred to me, and I don't know quite what to do with it, was just kind of an observation that there's this very narrow range of time where someone actually decides what CMS they're going to use. So at the point where somebody realizes what a CMS is and that it's a solution to their problem, at that point they start looking at CMSs, and as soon as they find something that looks like it might work, they stick with it until it absolutely won't work for them. So even a day or a week spent with a CMS is enough to start growing that bubble around you, where you may never step out of that bubble again. And so we have like a day or a week, maybe a month, as people are evaluating CMSs, to actually be able to help people to kind of point them in the direction that they need to decide that a Drupal is the right fit for them. So it's really interesting to think about that for every person out there who chooses a CMS, we have this like really small space to actually like get in there and pitch it. So like I said, I don't know quite what to do with that, but it seems like there could be some value for Drupal marketing or something. So one of the things that kind of bothered me at this expo and has bothered me in general is the fact that there's all these CMSs out there. In the Drupal space, there's a lot of encouragement to work together towards common solutions. So if somebody produces a module that does something, and another person wants to produce kind of a duplicate module that has some slightly different functionality, the community is going to really steer that person to focus their energy on the original module instead of building a second module, because they want that energy to be poured into one place, or they want those people to work on something else that's totally new and different, to actually capture energy in the right way. And so in talking with these various CMSs, a lot of them are covering the same ground right now as Drupal covered years ago. They're finally figuring out how to build a good views system or a good CCK or fieldable content type system, right? Things that Drupal has already figured out. And And so it's, I think, well, why don't we all work together on one CMS? Why don't we all just decide we're going to like solve the problem, make something really awesome, and just, and just do it, right? And absorb a lot more talent that way. And that's very idealistic and unrealistic, and for a lot of reasons. But I got a different perspective on this, which I think is healthy. So if any of you are sort of feeling that way sometimes, here's some alternate view on it, which is that we're really kind of in the infancy of CMS adoption. So not everybody knows what a CMS is. In fact, most people don't. And so little markets are popping up all over the place that are supporting the growth of these smaller CMSs. And all of the CMSs that were represented at this event were all supported by a community. They all had a fan base. They all had customers. And so it was clear that they were filling some kind of need, right? That not everybody knows what Drupal or Joomla or WordPress is yet, even. So because of this, it's kind of fueling these small sort of CMS startups, and they get to start from the ground up. So Drupal's been around for over 10 years. That's a lot of things to sort of bring with you and adapt over time, right? These guys are getting to start from scratch, learn from other CMSs that have been around a long time, and architect things in a way that might be better from the beginning. And so there's a lot of innovation happening in the CMS world right now, which is cool. Eventually, everything's going to grow up, and CMS will be a household word. Like, everybody will know what a CMS is. Chances are we'll have a better word for it when it becomes, general knowledge. But there will be a few big ones, and everybody will know what those are, just like our operating systems are, right? We know what the three big most people know what the three big operating systems are. And it's going to be kind of the same deal with CMSs. And at that point, it's going to be really hard for small CMSs to innovate and to grow and find their markets. And so now is the time to really capture the innovation that's happening and really try to bring it together if at all possible. So here's my thought, is that carrots should hug. It's that, what would happen if every one of us, not everybody here has been in Drupal a long time, or, you're evaluating Drupal, but kind of project in the future. Say you adopt Drupal and you've been using it for a long time. At some point, what if we all kind of decided to adopt some other CMS as well? Like, we actually took one other one seriously and could get a sense of what innovations were happening in it, what we could bring into the Drupal space, and supply some inspiration from Drupal into that CMS too. I have the sense that if we could actually communicate and cross-pollinate like that between different CMSs, that we could move faster in terms of innovation, in terms of ideas, in terms of general understanding about how CMSs work and what some solutions are to the problems that we're facing. So something that's kind of moving towards the top of my list is taking on one other CMS and really getting to know it well. And my choice, I think, is going to be ModX, just because I sat and they dealt with me in a shuttle for an hour or whatever, and also they're doing some interesting things. So I kind of want to take it seriously, see what we can pull into the Drupal space from there, and sort of start to cross-pollinate. So I don't know how many of you kind of agree with that idea that it might be a good thing to kind of step out of our bubbles, start looking in other bubbles. The thing about bubbles is that they're kind of they're a little semi-transparent, right? So you're inside a bubble looking out. Everything looks kind of not so awesome. Everything inside the bubble looks more awesome. But you step out and go into another bubble, and in that bubble things start to look awesome. But you got to get in that bubble first in order to really see it that way. So that's my thought there. Are you guys interested in seeing just a few of the sort of innovations that are happening in other CMSs that I think might be relevant to Drupal? Yeah. Okay. I thought you would. So ModX. The Drupal platform is really built with with developers primarily in mind, right? It's always been sort of developer-centric, whereas ModX is very designer-centric. And so, if you're a designer coming into Drupal, like, you have your work cut out for you. So some of you know what I'm talking about. In order to change a template file, for example, you have to have access to the file system for one, which isn't, always going to be easy. You have to find the place where the templates are stored. You have to copy an existing template potentially, or, start a new one yourself. And you have to name it something very specific, so that it gets registered properly. And then when you get into the template, there's all this PHP in there, which is a little scary if you're not used to code, right? So that whole system just really, it's no fun. And so designers who are like looking between Drupal and ModX will often choose ModX because here's what its template system looks like. This is what it looks like. It's a back-end thing. You want to create a template, you go into the administrative system and you fill out a form, you name it whatever you want. You can organize it however you want into a hierarchy of folders and files. Files in the sense of you see kind of a hierarchy there on the left. And then to associate content with a template, it's just a drop-down. You say, hey, this is a template I want to use for this piece of content. And so it's very intuitive for designers, and they find this really easy to use. And a designer can spin up a whole website using ModX with a pretty little ramp-up. So I think there's some ideas here that we can definitely pull into Drupal. We can create an alternate system for working with templates that like mirrors what's happening on the file level. Something, Anyways, you agree? Yeah, some of you? Okay. So another one I thought was interesting was Perforce Chronicle. So Perforce is a commercial version control system. How many of you guys are developers here? How many of you are not developers? Okay. So the idea of version control is that you can take code and take snapshots of it. So if someone screws something up, you can roll it back to previous snapshots. So you're not like, it's like, saving your Word document and you save it like 2002, 2012-01, version number, blah, 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 right? And you save it every hour because you don't want to screw something up and not have a backup. It's like that, except for code. And Perforce is a version control system that's a little different than Git or Subversion. One of the things that it does is it version controls digital or binary assets like videos and images, which Git, for those of you who are developers, you probably know what I'm talking about here. Git and Subversion don't do digital assets or don't do binary assets very well, but Perforce does, which is kind of cool. For the rest of you can tune back in now. So Perforce Chronicle is a CMS built on top of Perforce, and everything is version controlled. So in Drupal, if we want to version control things that are in the database, like user information, settings about views and content types, and anything that we have to point and click for an hour in Drupal to build, like that, if someone screws that up, it can be really hard to figure out what's going on. But when it's in code, then we can look at one version versus another and kind of see what happened. And we use a module called Features in order to make that happen. And Features is it's not easy to use, but it's the best solution that we have. Perforce Chronicle is built on top of version control. Everything is version controlled by default. So content, users, settings, permissions, all that stuff gets captured in version control. And so there's always a record of what's happened, of who's done what on your site, and you can roll things back, you can compare differences, you can see who was responsible for what changes, and point fingers and stuff. But I think that's a pretty powerful idea. I think we're moving towards something that's more like that in Drupal 8. But still, some good ideas here. And also, I don't know if you see this sort of drop down in the upper left-hand corner. It says staging. So a typical sort of way you put changes from a website into the live version, you have a development site, you have a staging site where you test things out, and then you push it to production, which is the live site that everybody sees. And most of the time, these are 3 different sites, 3 different interfaces. You got to kind of have 3 different browser windows open or whatever. But here, you can just easily switch between them all and go between the different interfaces interchangeably, which I think is kind of an awesome idea too. So the last thing I wanted to mention was that it was .NET Nuke, and I don't really know much about its feature set, but what I do know, I talked to the founder of .NET Nuke for a while, and in my community, in my Drupal community, we've always kind of like you're using .NET Nuke, like why are you using that's nasty? Like use Drupal, right? And there's always sort of this atmosphere around anything .NET, like why are you using it? It's closed source, all this stuff. Well, .NET Nuke is an open source CMS platform, and what I started realizing was that not everybody knows PHP. And so you have all of these developers who are maybe interested in contributing to a commonly usable free solution out there. But if they don't know PHP, they're out of luck. They can't really plug into Drupal. But there are projects like .NET Nuke and other projects for Cold Fusion for Java that are open source free CMSs where they can contribute and they can make a difference. And even though we can't share code between these different projects, we can at least share ideas and see what's going on in these different spaces. And it opens up the CMS community to all these people that it wouldn't normally be open to. So I think that's a healthier way to look at it, and to be kind of excited of the fact that there are these other projects going on and embrace them. Yeah, so that's kind of some interesting things going on out there. So that's it for this talk. If you guys want to get in touch with me later, here's some contact info. I think we're running a little bit late, and so if you guys have any questions or comments about all this stuff, definitely find me and we can chat about it. And I'd love to meet any of you out here who are interested in talking. So thank you so much.